Hello, I am Aegon the Informer, and I'm here today to inform you about the bisexuality of Rhaenyra Targaryen. So apparently, angry House of the Dragon fans are claiming that one gay kiss has ruined the series. At first, I was surprised to hear about this controversy because I recently watched the movie Tequila Sunrise, where Michelle Pfeiffer literally gets her face eaten by Val Kilmer for like 3 minutes in 1988. And that was fine, but when Emma Darcy does it 36 years later to a woman on HBO, it creates a controversy? So I went to check the IMDb review stats, and when I saw that it was only 11,000 people giving it 1 star, I just kind of shrugged. First, because 11,000 people is not that many, especially considering the fact that we don't know how many of them are bots or just duplicate accounts. However, when a famous entertainment website like Vanity Fair writes a headline like this, they signal boost the controversy, and then it gets seen by millions of people who are then going to use it as an excuse to either hate the brand or say something like this: "Thou shalt not escape from the agenda," referring to the kiss as part of an alleged LGBTQ plus conspiracy. Wait, what? The agenda? Alright, so this is what triggered me to make this video, because if you want to talk about the agenda, then let's talk about the agenda of George R.R. Martin, part 1. On August 8th of the year 2000, before the beginning of this so-called LGBTQ plus agenda, George R.R. Martin wrote a book called A Song of Ice and Fire, A Storm of Swords, which I'm sure none of those angry House of the Dragon fans ever read. And in this book, there was this character. Geez, what was her name again? Alright, Daenerys Targaryen. In season 2 of Game of Thrones, Dany had a Dothraki handmaiden. Her name was Irri. You may not remember her because shortly after this will they won't they scene, she dies. But in the books, she doesn't die. And this happens between her and Dany.
Irri woke and saw what she was doing. Dany knew her face was flushed, but in the darkness, Irri surely could not tell. Wordless, the handmaid put a hand on her breast, then bent to take a nipple in her mouth. Her other hand drifted down across the soft curve of belly and went to work between Dany's thighs. Irri never said a thing, only curled back up and went back to sleep the instant the thing was done.
In case you're wondering, this was not the only time Dany did that.
Later, when the time came for sleep, Dany took Irri into bed with her for the first time since the ship. But even as she shuddered in release and wound her fingers through her handmaid's thick black hair, she pretended it was Drogo holding her. Only somehow his face kept turning into Daario's. If I want Daario, I need only say so. She lay with Irri's legs entangled in her own. His eyes looked almost purple today.
Daenerys Targaryen was simply exploring her sexuality. And by doing it, she discovered that who she really liked was Daario. So George R.R. Martin decided to give not one, but 2 lesbian experiences to Daenerys. But for some reason, Benioff and Weiss refused to give Dany any bisexual tendencies in the TV show, making Dany, as hilariously written in this essay by one Tessa Wilkinson, Daenerys Targaryen, Mother of Dragons, Breaker of Chains, Queen of the Andals, and Keeper of the Lesbian Void. So in this article from 2023, Tessa Wilkinson was so mad that Dany didn't get her lesbian arc in the TV show that she wrote this essay last year with one wish in mind. Rhaenyra and Alicent still showcase incredibly charged emotions towards one another. The first season of House of the Dragon ends with Alicent reaching out with a piece of their shared girlhood. I understand their story may be a bit tragic and doomed, but a girl can dream. I beg you, House of the Dragon writers, do not send them to the void as you did in the past. They have suffered at the hands of man enough. Let them return to the relief and solace they once provided each other, and this time let it be love. And so in part 2, I want to quickly explore this friendship between Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen, the Realm's Delight, brilliantly played by Millie Alcock, the Woman of Tomorrow, and Emily Carey, who was, in my opinion, in the top 3 of the best performances in season 1 of House of the Dragon. Because Emily gave us this incredibly strong, young Alicent Hightower, who makes you understand the horror that young highborn ladies had to go through while their fathers used them for their Games of Thrones. Now, Emily Carey in 2022 did this interview with Variety where she described the relationship between Princess Rhaenyra and Lady Alicent. In this part of the interview, she explains how Rhaenyra and Alicent have no control over their own lives and future. A perfect example of what she's describing is how in this scene, her father, Otto Hightower, is literally pimping her out for the ambitions of House Hightower, which obviously makes Alicent feel not only miserable, but also stressed out and anxious to the point that she starts eating her nails. Because her father, Otto, is very clear about what he expects from her, what he expects her to do to the king, and it obviously makes her feel so anxious when he tells her to wear one of her mother's dresses, which is just sick. Which is why notice how the only times Emily Carey smiles in season 1 are all scenes where she's alone with Rhaenyra. Because Rhaenyra provides her with a friendship that gives her relief and solace, as Tessa Wilkinson stated earlier. And yes, I am saying friendship, because as Emily stated in the very same interview with Variety, Carrey doesn't feel the need to put a label on the relationship, leaving it up to the viewer interpretation. We didn't intend to play it. We weren't making them gay or queer baiting or anything like that. It's just, if you want to read into it and see it like that, do it. If you want to see them as more than friends, do it. If you don't, then don't. Being a queer woman myself, it was something that I was conscious of, but I wasn't consciously putting it out there, Carrey adds. They're 14-year-old girls. They don't know the difference between platonic and romantic. They don't even know what the words mean, let alone what the feelings mean. Which is why my personal theory is that I believe Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen did indeed have a crush on Alicent Hightower when they were teenagers. However, I believe that Alicent, back then, friend-zoned Rhaenyra, because I, for one, could not find one evidence or any sorts of proof that Alicent Hightower had any bisexual tendencies, either in the books or the TV shows. However, I will later prove in the next two parts of this video that Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen was indeed bisexual when she was a teenager. And for those who didn't read Fire and Blood, you need to understand that this friendship between Rhaenyra and Alicent does not exist in the books. In Fire and Blood, it's completely the opposite. Alicent Hightower is actually 9 years older than Rhaenyra. They never got along. Alicent basically plays the role of the evil stepmother. But instead in the TV show, they not only made them the same age, but they even made them childhood friends. The point that I'm trying to make is that Ryan Condal deciding to change the book to give them this friendship was literally the best decision that they made in season 1 of House of the Dragon. Because otherwise, this scene in episode 3 of season 2, when Rhaenyra Targaryen sneaks in King's Landing to speak to Alicent Hightower, risking her life, risking the war, worked. Because they set up their friendship so well in season 1. Otherwise, this would have been the worst scene in the season, because there is no reason why Alicent shouldn't have given the order to seize Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen the second her life was safe, because it must have not been easy for Rhaenyra to escape King's Landing and run away. But Alicent gave her the time to run away because of that friendship in season 1. Part 3. Bisexual Parallels. So, if you watch my video, Anatomy of a Dragon, you will already be familiar with one of my favorite Targaryen characters. That is, another one of Aenys and Alyssa Velaryon's children, the Queen in the West and the Queen in the East, the Black Bride, Rhaena Targaryen, Rider of Dreamfire. Princess Rhaena was 18 and Prince Aegon 15 when they were betrothed. She attracted many suitors but encouraged none, though some rumors claim that she had already given up her maidenhead to several lowborn men she met during her journeys. Unfortunately for Rhaena, she wasn't able to enjoy that freedom and happiness for much longer, because soon after that, her brother husband Aegon the Uncrowned was murdered by Maegor the Cruel. And this is the first parallel that I want to highlight between Rhaena Targaryen and Rhaenyra Targaryen, that they both lost the first true love of their life. I am of course talking about Harwin Strong and even Laenor Velaryon, whom Rhaenyra loved platonically, and both were murdered in the books. Then, soon after the murder of her brother Aegon, childless Maegor the Cruel married a third wife, Tiana of the Tower. However, that didn't help him much, because even Tiana couldn't give him a child. That is because, in my opinion, Maegor was sterile. He was the one who couldn't have children and kept blaming his wives for it. And so, soon after his third wedding, Maegor, because of reasons, he decided to carve the heart out of Tiana of the Tower. Basically while she was still alive too. And now he didn't have a third wife anymore. So what did he do? He wanted to marry his niece Rhaena. And the reason why he wanted to marry Rhaena was because she had already proven to be fertile. She had had twins with her brother Aegon, Rhaenyra Targaryen, one of the riders of Velaryon, which we've talked about plenty in the past, in my last 2 videos actually, and Rhaena Targaryen. And so, to force Rhaena to come out of hiding, he kidnapped her twin daughters, whom he was able to locate, and basically ordered her to come to King's Landing for a triple wedding. The 2 other women he was going to marry at the same time as Rhaena were Jane Westerling and Elinor Castaigne. Both of these 2 women also had proven to be fertile. Parallel number 2. Rhaena got married to her uncle who was using her for the Iron Throne, and Rhaenyra also married her uncle who was using her for the Iron Throne. And I am of course talking about Daemon Targaryen, whom one could argue is nothing like Maegor, and so that the parallel wouldn't stand. However, in season 2 of House of the Dragon, in episode 4, in what is maybe my favorite scene of the season so far, we get Millie Alcock wearing the crown of Jaehaerys the Conciliator, saying, "You created me, Daemon, yet you're now set on destroying me." Clearly implying that Daemon did marry Rhaenyra just to use her to get closer to the Iron Throne. And so, shortly after the triple wedding of the Black Brides, Maegor the Cruel finally died, pushed on the Iron Throne by none other than Elinor Castaigne, whom if you read the text it's actually very obvious, because one night she was real tired of Maegor's BS and pushed him on the Iron Throne. She had the courage to do something that no other man before her and no other woman before her had ever had the guts to do. And so Maegor the Cruel, rider of Velaryon, wielder of Blackfire, undefeated on the battlefield, finally died murdered by a woman. And then, soon after that, Rhaena gets married for a 3rd time.
When Rhaena married Andro Farman, the court had been surprised by the marriage. Andro lacked the skill to be a knight, and was even said to be incapable of reading and writing. But these facts did not matter to Rhaena, who said she had married him because of his kindness. Others would speculate that she was moved to do it for other reasons, either to thank Lord Farman for the shelter he had given her after the battle beneath the God's Eye, or because of Andro's sister Alyssa.
Basically, Rhaena married Andrew Farman for 2 reasons. One, because she wanted to get closer to his sister, Alyssa Farman. And second, because he was kind and also kind of skillless, so kind of useless and harmless, and she saw him as a tool, basically. And here we get the 3rd parallel between Rhaena and Rhaenyra, because Rhaena married someone that she was never really sexually attracted to, but married him anyways, because it was her way of gaining her freedom to be able to do and sleep with whoever she wanted on the side. And we all remember why Rhaenyra married Laenor Velaryon, right? Rhaenyra offered a deal to Laenor that they perform their duty to their fathers by getting married, while still being able to dine as they see fit. Rhaenyra was already setting up the table that would later allow her to literally eat whatever she wants, no pun intended, which, of course, Laenor accepted. And for me, I really want to highlight this scene where Laenor Velaryon is the only one who offers to help Rhaenyra walk, literally minutes after she gave birth. Laenor Velaryon was truly a great man. Now, to get back to Rhaena Targaryen, others would speculate that she was moved to marry Andrew Farman for other reasons.
Others would speculate that she was moved to do it for other reasons. Andro's sister, Alyssa. She was also still unwed, having twice chased away men who had been betrothed to her. It was little surprise that she and Queen Rhaena found themselves confidants, and along with Elaine Royce and Samantha Stokeworth, Rhaena's other companions, they made a court of women within the wider court of Faircastle.
However, things took a turn for the bad soon after that. It didn't really go as Rhaena had planned. You see, Alyssa Farman was very ambitious. She dreamed of adventure, kind of like how Arya Stark in Season 8 dreamed of sailing west of Westeros. Well, Elissa Farman literally does that. And so, long story short, Elissa Farman was able to purchase a boat that she names Sunchaser and literally sails west of Westeros and abandons both her brother Andrew and Rhaena Targaryen for an adventure. But it didn't take long for Rhaena Targaryen to move on from Elissa Farman. Remember how Rhaena had her women's court of Faircastle? Well, she then fully embraced her lesbian side and found many new female confidants. And we do know that she was very close to Samantha Stokeworth and Elaine Royce, and many other females who were in the wider court of Faircastle. Problem was, Andrew Farman started feeling very lonely because he had lost both his sister and his wife, who really didn't give any more attention to him. And she was not hiding the fact that she was sleeping with many of her female confidants. And so Andrew Farman started secretly poisoning Rhaena's girlfriends. At first, they thought that there was a disease spreading who was taking the lives of these women. But then when Rhaena figured out that it was Andrew Farman, she threw him out of a window and fed his body to Dreamfire. And here ends our story with Rhaena Targaryen. And so far, if you've been keeping track, we found 3 parallels. Both Rhaena and Rhaenyra experienced the murder of their first love. Both got married to their uncles who used them for the Iron Throne. Both, at some point of their lives, married a kind man that they didn't love or weren't sexually attracted to in order to gain their freedom, to be able to experience sexual freedom, to be precise. Part 4, the real proof, and the 4th hidden parallel. In my quest for the truth, to get to the bottom of this, I wanted to make sure that I had not missed anything. And I went on the A Song of Ice and Fire wiki and typed in bisexual. It only returned 5 results, but one of them, called gender and sexuality, turned out to be very interesting. First is the list of characters who have engaged in LGBT plus behavior in the universe of A Song of Ice and Fire. For example, under explicitly confirmed, we see listed Loras Tyrell and Renly Baratheon. Now, for those who didn't read the books, you have to know that the relationship between Loras and Renly is not explicitly confirmed in the books. You have to figure it out by yourself. There are a lot of hints, but George R.R. Martin doesn't tell it to you directly. However, George R.R. Martin did later confirm in an interview the relationship between Loras and Renly, which is why it's under explicitly confirmed. Then we see a list of characters who have engaged in various degrees of LGBT plus behavior, but who were never confirmed to be LGBT plus, but were implied to be. There we find, of course, Laena Velaryon, whose homosexuality was only explicitly confirmed in the TV show, but not in the books. Then we find Rhaena Targaryen. As we previously read, her one true love was Elissa Farman, but then it adds that Rhaena had another favorite female companion that I personally had never noticed before.
At the age of 12, she took to the skies for the first time, and thereafter, though she remained a quiet girl, no one dared to call her timid. Not long after, Rhaena made her first true friend in the person of her cousin, Larissa Velaryon. For a time, the two girls were inseparable, until Larissa was suddenly recalled to Driftmark to be wed to the second son of the Evenstar of Tarth. The young are nothing if not resilient, however, and the princess soon found a new companion in the Hand's daughter, Samantha Stokeworth.
Indeed, Rhaena's first female crush was not Elissa Farman, it was her cousin, Larissa Velaryon. And then I saw it. The actual proof, which I had never noticed before. Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen and Lady Laena Velaryon may have had an affair. It is possibly alluded that Laena was attracted to women. As the Maester of Driftmark noted, that Laena showed far more interest in flying than in boys. Shortly after that, it is stated that Rhaenyra was fond and more than fond of her good sister, Laena.
House Velaryon had been passed over once again. His daughter, Laena, scorned just as his son, Laenor, had been scorned by the Great Council, and his wife by the Old King back in 92 AC. Only Lady Laena herself seemed untroubled. Her ladyship shows far more interest in flying than in boys, the Maester at High Tide wrote to the Citadel. Whilst Princess Rhaenyra misliked her stepmother, Queen Alicent, she became fond and more than fond of her good sister Lady Laena. With Driftmark and Dragonstone so close, Daemon and Laena oft visited with the princess, and her with them. Many a time they flew together on their dragons, and the princess's she-dragon Syrax produced several clutches of eggs.
George R.R. Martin, you sneaky beautiful bastard. The fourth hidden parallel, the first female crush for both Rhaena and Rhaenyra, were their female Velaryon cousins when they were teenagers. And so now I can finally reveal why I believe that Princess Rhaenyra had a crush on young Alicent Hightower when they were teenagers. Because maybe, just maybe, instead of having a crush on Laena Velaryon, they replaced the character of Laena by Alicent. Because the book doesn't say that Rhaena had a sexual lesbian relationship with Larissa Velaryon. Just like it doesn't say that Rhaenyra had any lesbian relationship with Laena Velaryon. We're talking about female crushes as teenagers, which is why I believe that Rhaenyra did indeed have a crush on Alicent. And this also reinforces the parallel that Rhaenyra married Laenor for kindness, but in the book, maybe she married him to get closer to his sister Laena, just like Rhaena married Andrew to get closer to his sister Alyssa. But then I asked myself, how about Daemon? The text clearly states that both Daemon and Laena often visited the princess, Rhaenyra, and that all three of them flew together on their dragons. And the princess's she-dragon Syrax produced several clutches of eggs during that period. Well, the answer is simple. Grooming! Daemon Targaryen was grooming Rhaenyra Targaryen! According to the definition from Canada.ca, grooming is when someone builds trust with a child, and sometimes the adults around them, to gain access to and control the child by normalizing certain behaviors and expectations. First, Daemon grooms Rhaenyra by buying her special gifts. That literally links them. In this case, Daemon says in episode 1 of season 1, when he gives Rhaenyra the Valyrian steel necklace, "You and I both own a small piece of our ancestry," making her feel special and further linking her to him. And then he comes back in episode 4 to remind her of the gift. Then, after that, Daemon takes the grooming to a whole other level by taking Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen to a brothel in Fleabottom. There, he starts his process of normalizing sexual debauchery, normalizing orgies and threesome. He sets her sexual expectations to be that of the brothel. He teaches her that this is what normal sex is like. He continues by normalizing homosexual relationships, directly teaching her that having sex for pleasure is normal, having sex with the same sex is normal, that she shouldn't be shy to satisfy any of her sexual urges. And then, when her guard is at her weakest, he seals the deal with a kiss. You created me, Daemon! Now, I want you to please put a pin on the grooming for a second, and let's talk about the mating of dragons. Now, if you watch my video, Anatomy of a Dragon, you may remember that when we covered Vermithor and Silverwing, we found out that, as directly stated by the Maesters in Fire and Blood, it is implied that the bonds of a dragon rider and their dragon may affect the dragon's mating habits. King Jaehaerys Targaryen's dragon Vermithor often coiled with his queen Alysanne Targaryen's Silverwing, even 5 decades after their rider's death. Meaning, when two dragons start mating, it is a sign that their riders are having sex with each other. So now let me ask you, when did Syrax start mating with Caraxes? It's written right there! Daemon Targaryen and Laena Velaryon often visited with the princess and her with them. Many a time they flew together on the dragons, and the princess's she-dragon Syrax produced several clutches of eggs during that period. Were they having ce qu'on appelle un ménage à trois? Were they having threesomes? Were Rhaenyra, Daemon, and Laena having sex with each other during that period? I think so. George R.R. Martin. This is why I love him and his agenda so much. This is a perfect example of why he's a genius. And may the gods, both old and new, protect this man for as long as possible. George writes his books with the purpose of being reread, reanalyzed. It takes him decades to write a book because his books are so layered, so complex, so full of foreshadowing, so full of parallels. And you can perfectly picture the situation between Laena, Daemon, and Rhaenyra. At this point, Rhaenyra has lost both Harwin Strong and Laena Velaryon. Then you have Daemon and Laena show up. And then one night, after the three of them had a bit too much Valyrian wine, Daemon says, effing is a pleasure, you see, for the woman as it is the man. So he then just orders Laena or Rhaenyra to start kissing each other, and then boom, threesome. So now, considering everything we just saw and read, can anyone still doubt the bisexuality of Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen? Can anyone really believe that this case was part of a secret LGBTQ plus agenda? Or instead, that George R.R. Martin had already set up Rhaenyra to be bisexual all along in the books, even before the TV show aired? Alright, so we finally come to the end of the proving the bisexuality of Rhaenyra Targaryen. However, before we go, I want to conclude with one final part, the epilogue if you may. But before that, I just want to quickly remind everyone to please subscribe to this channel, like the video, and ideally also comment anything to help the algorithm. So please just subscribe. Alright, so now on to part 5. An ode to Emma Darcy. Because honestly, we haven't talked enough about Emma Darcy, who elevates the character of Rhaenyra to such a high level that I am literally at awe every time they're on screen. And I want you to look at the picture on the left specifically. I chose it because this was the very first scene that Emma Darcy showed up in episode 6 of season 1. The reason why I love this scene so much is because we had just spent 5 episodes in season 1 with Millie Alcock, who had really knocked it out of the park. Perfect Princess Rhaenyra. And I remember that everyone was very sad to see her leave and being replaced with Emma Darcy. And in their very first scene, they had to give birth, followed immediately by having to do a sort of walk of shame through the castle that Alicent makes her go through. And I remember being completely amazed by this scene because Emma Darcy was not doing a walk of shame at all. Their head was held high, and within seconds, I had forgotten Millie Alcock. No offense to Millie, of course, but just because Emma was that good. That performance was incredible. And I often wondered, what is it about Emma Darcy that makes them so perfect as playing Rhaenyra Targaryen? What makes Emma Darcy amaze me so much? And then I figured it out. Gravitas. And I don't mean the word gravitas that is often thrown around nowadays. I mean, I'm talking about the Roman way of talking about it. Gravitas. One of the Romanitist values of leadership that the Romans used to believe every effective leader had to be either born with or had to learn, which included in its meaning the weight, the dignity, the importance, the seriousness, and thoughtfulness that they believed all senators, consuls, and later on emperors had to have. Julius Caesar himself, like him or not, on this picture you can see it. He has gravitas. Roman Emperor Commodus, as brilliantly played by Joaquin Phoenix as the spoiled little brat who killed Marcus Aurelius, played it so perfectly that he was showing that Commodus had no gravitas. And I stumbled upon this picture of Emma Darcy from 2015 when they were playing Romeo in a Romeo and Juliet adaptation. And that's when I realized that on this picture, you can see it. Emma has gravitas. The seriousness, the dignity, the importance, the weight. And this is why I believe that the casting of Emma Darcy as Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen was one of the best things that could ever happen to House of the Dragon, along with Ryan Condal. And in a world where Rings of Power and Season 2 of The Witcher exist, I will personally forever be grateful that we got not one, but 2 incredible Rhaenyra Targaryens. And for that, to Emma and to Millie, thank you.